Alright, we're going to start reading our folk tale called Johnny Appleseed. Some folks become heroes through bravery. Some folks make their name by being smart or clever, and others are famous for their kindness. Johnny Appleseed had all of these qualities, but above all, he was kind. He lived his life to help others. Johnny's real name was John Chapman. He was born near Boston around the year 1775. He was a deeply religious man who always carried the Bible with him. When he was a teenager, he worked as a missionary to the Indians. Next to the Bible, Johnny's favorite book was Aesop's Fables. The tales of the animals and their human behavior captured his imagination, and he tried to live the lessons taught by the stories. Sometimes Johnny had mystical, mysterious vision in which angels would appear to him. When he was about 26 years old, an angel told Johnny to plant apple seeds in the wilderness so that settlers moving west could enjoy their fruit. Johnny began collecting apple seeds from cider mills in western Pennsylvania. He carried them in a giant leather sack, which he slung over his back. He also carried a few small pouches of seeds in his pockets to give to people he met. He did most of his planting in Ohio and Indiana, hiking hundreds of miles year-round. There's no doubt about it, Johnny Appleseed was an unusual man. He was thin and wiry, and rarely shaved or cut his hair. He wore whatever old clothes people would trade him for his seeds, but usually he wore a sauce pot on his head and a coffee sack with armholes cut out as shirts. Sometimes someone would give him a pair of shoes, but as soon as Johnny came upon a needy fellow, he would gladly give them up. Johnny loved to feel the earth between his toes. As Johnny made his way across the land, he would clear a field in the wilderness and plant his seeds. Then he would build a fence around the seedlings and move on. Settlers heading through the countryside would find Johnny's orchard and feel at home. Families moving west would dig up some trees to replant on their homesteads. Johnny would visit each cabin he passed, helping with the chores, spreading the latest news and amusing the children with songs and stories. He also started what may have been the first lending library on the frontier. Along with his seeds, Johnny carried religious books. He would leave a few pages at each home and collect them when he passed by again. Johnny realized that he could learn much from the Indians. His strange appearance, his knowledge of the deep woods, and the fact that he carried no weapons won him the admiration of the Indians. They considered him a medicine man who had magical powers. He learned their languages and how to use herbs and heal injuries. He spent as much time with the Indians as with the settlers. During a visit with the Indians, Johnny learned that they were planning to hurt the settlers whose cabins dotted the forest. Johnny spent the night racing through the woods, dressed in his coffee sack, knocking on every cabin door. To each sleepy settler he shouted, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, and he has anointed me to blow the trumpet in the wilderness and sound an alarm in the forest. The Indians are at your doors." Hearing the warning, the settlers were able to escape danger. Another time, the Indians were closing in on a white settlement, and the settlers' only hope was to get a message to a fort 30 miles away. But the settlers knew that any messenger would probably be hurt. Even so, Johnny Appleseed volunteered for the duty. He was able to make it safely over the trails he knew so well. Troops were sent in from the fort, and the families in the settlement were saved. It wasn't just human life that Johnny considered to be precious. To him, every living thing had an equal right to be alive. He never ate meat, and he was as courteous to animals as he was to people. During a bad winter snowstorm, Johnny sought shelter in a hollow log. As he climbed in, he noticed that the log was already occupied by a bear. Rather than push the bear out, Johnny risked his own life by sleeping outside in the freezing cold, huddled next to the log. Johnny's love of the animals even extended to insects. A hornet once flew into his clothes. As he tried to shake it loose, it stung him several times. When asked why he didn't kill it, he replied, "Why should I kill it? It's only behaving the way it intended to behave." Another time, Johnny smothered his campfire the moment he noticed that bugs were being drawn into it and burned. Johnny Appleseed planted trees and protected animals for almost 50 years. He died near Fort Wayne, Indiana, after devoting his life to spreading kindness across the rough frontier. The end.